Good morning. Well, today is the day before Memorial Day, and the day our church celebrates the Memorial Day holiday, which is not a religious holiday, but which has spiritual and religious implications. Today's sermon will cover a wide range of topics, some of which may feel especially challenging to some folks. And if that's the case, I just want to let folks know I'm always open for dialogue and discussion. A poem that we children learned in elementary school back in the early 60s seems to me to best capture the spirit of what Memorial Day, once called Decoration Day, was created for. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard among the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. The poem captures a sense of loss and the stark reality of death as measured against the images of brightly waving poppies and gaily singing larks. It eulogizes determination to succeed in one's cause even after death. It encourages loyalty and assigns guilt as a penalty for failing to follow through on the cause embraced by the fallen. Flanders Fields was a term adopted by the English for the battlefields in France and Belgium in the First World War. Because of the success of this poem, poppies are now the most widely used symbol of remembrance for those who died in battle. The first national celebration of Decoration Day occurred on May 30th, 1868. It was proclaimed by the Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic to honor Union soldiers who had died in the Civil War. In 1971, Congress standardized the holiday as Memorial Day and changed its observance to the last Monday in May. The Memorial Day weekend is now, of course, considered the unofficial start of summer, which at one time was considered by many to be an affront to the fallen heroes, whom the holiday was meant to honor. And that controversy seems to have diminished over time, though certainly articles continue to be written deploring this trivialization and encouraging people to remember the true meaning of the day. If acts of sacrifice are not recounted over generations, the honor due to fallen heroes, soldiers, will be lost. Personally, I am grateful that no members of my family or my parents' families have died in wars, certainly not in American wars, certainly not in the past 3 or 4 generations. My father is the only one of my ancestors to have fought in the United States military, having enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Force in early 1942. He served in the North African campaign in a division that moved east into Egypt, then across the Mediterranean into Sicily, and up to Naples, and then to Rome, and then further north in Italy. He never spoke of his military experiences. I only know what I do know from photographs and documents and scribbled notes found in an old wallet after he died. He regarded his day of discharge, October 18th, 1945, as a day of personal liberation. Certainly, I have personal reasons to be grateful for his survival, as none of us 4 kids would have been born, nor would his marriage to my mother have taken place had he not survived. The only comments I ever heard my father make about his military service were, one, disgust at the Army's policy of hurry up and wait, and two, and possibly related, the unambiguous condemnation that the Army had stolen 4 good years of his life. And here is the first contradiction that appears when we glorify military service. We think of it as a grand idea and a noble enterprise in theory, but when faced with actual experience, many of those in the service feel as much victim as hero. Life is filled with complexities, and as I've cautioned many times, we all too often try to boil down choices and experience into polarities, all good or all bad, all glory or all shame, hero or villain. We would do well to walk with caution through the land of polarities. There is no doubt that we will be tangled up in complexity unless we devote ourselves completely to simplification, and then allies and enemies are both made clear, but with no degree of accuracy. The minister whose friendship I most value in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where I served as settled minister for 8 years, is a senior pastor of the local Lutheran church. Holy Trinity is a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the more conservative of the 2 Lutheran denominations. One of the signature teachings of the Lutheran Reformation is sola scriptura. The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod believes that the Bible is the only standard by which church teachings can be judged. The ordained and commissioned ministers of religion in the Missouri Synod churches are sworn by their oaths of ordination and installation, or both, to interpret the sacred scriptures according to the Book of Concord, a series of confessions of faith adopted by Lutherans in the 16th century. The Missouri Synod also teaches the inerrancy of the Bible, the teaching that the Bible is inspired by God and is without error. I don't need to tell you that the foundation of my spiritual life is not the same as Andy's. His politics are as conservative as his theology. Early on in our friendship, he stated that politically he was to the right of Attila the Hun, though I found this to be greatly exaggerated in practice. He is unabashedly pro-military and pro-police. I have my reservations about both institutions, but I try my best to see where he's coming from and to search for areas of agreement. Relationships are complex, if not always complicated. Ideology tends to be simplistic, as interpreted by us everyday folks. At heart, I'm a pacifist. I see myself in agreement with Gandhi's statement, "There are many causes I would die for. There is not a single cause I would kill for." And yet, how could any freedom-loving person of conscience refuse to stand up to the march of fascism across Europe in 1939 and into the 1940s? Aren't there some things worth fighting for? And how are decisions of conscience made? As often as not, the pressure applied by peers who are themselves trying to gin up their courage plays a determining role. The opening chapter of Ann Tyler's The Amateur Marriage provides a startlingly clear example of this. We owe a debt of loyalty to the country that provides what liberties we have and the economic structure in which we can make our livings. But where does that debt begin, and where does it end? What does your country have a right to ask of you, to demand of you? Patriotism, like all isms, is complex. Do you stand and place your hand over your heart, and recite aloud the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States? If so, why? If not, why not? I think it's completely appropriate for sessions of Congress, United States Congress, to open with the pledge. It's appropriate, too, for government meetings of all kinds, local and statewide, as well as national. But is it appropriate to require children to start the day by placing their hands over their hearts and to publicly pledge their loyalty, especially when they are too young to know what they are pledging? Doesn't that smack of indoctrination? During my 2 years as a classroom teacher at a Catholic high school in Kingston, Massachusetts, I was charged with accompanying the class in a recitation of the pledge each morning as the vice principal spoke it aloud over the loudspeaker system. I found that I could not do it. I bristled. I stood up at the side of the classroom. I looked at the flag as the young people recited, but I kept my mouth shut, even as the students glanced my way and tried to assess my motives. Only once did a student speak to me about it, asking after class why I did not say the words. I told her the truth. If people wish to pledge allegiance to the flag, that's their choice. But no one should be placed in a position where they feel pressured by an institution to conform in this way. If we value our freedom to make choices about when and where we pledge our allegiance. Would I be willing to stick to my guns if my job were threatened for not obeying this dictate? It never came to that. But I have to say, I expect I would have. Where does freedom to act according to conscience begin? And where does it end? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Those are the words to the pledge, but not the original words. The phrase "one nation under God" was added in 1954 at the height of the Red Scare and in the midst of the notorious leadership of Senator Joseph McCarthy of the House Un-American Activities Committee, a particularly noxious period in American politics, where careers were derailed and lives upended by scattershot accusations of communism within the American government and local governments, and among Hollywood celebrities. Does a country founded on principles of liberty get to determine your understanding of who or what God is? Don't ask so many questions, you might be advised. Go along to get along. A pernicious philosophy. In the mid to late 70s, I read Philip Agee's account of his personal experience called Inside the Company, CIA Diary. It detailed how the CIA funneled millions of dollars into political campaigns of corrupt businessmen and their cronies, funded the strikes of anti-communist trade unions, and peddled massive amounts of propaganda through compromised news outlets. Were the targets of the CIA Soviet communists or any movement that opposes the free flow of money from the third world countries into the United States? The American economy profited from this disruption we encouraged and fomented. Is that what patriotism is? Don't ask so many questions. Go along to get along. Many of you here, probably most of you here, remember the day in May 1970 when 4 unarmed college students were shot and killed by the Ohio National Guard on the Kent State University campus during a peace rally opposing the expanding involvement of the Vietnam War into Cambodia by United States military forces. 9 other students, also unarmed, were also shot, though they survived their wounds, one becoming permanently paralyzed. Whose side are you on became the question that radiated across the country, especially among young people. The United States Constitution guarantees the right of free assembly and the right for free for peaceful protest? How can the killing of unarmed students by representatives of the United States government be justified? Halliburton Company is an American multinational corporation responsible for most of the world's hydraulic fracturing operations. In the run-up to the Iraq War, Halliburton was awarded a $7 billion contract for which only Halliburton was allowed to bid. The Vice President of the United States under George W. Bush was Dick Cheney, who was CEO of Halliburton from 1995 to 2000. He retired from the company during the 2000 presidential campaign with a severance package worth $36 million. Bunatine Greenhouse, a civil servant with 20 years of contracting experience, had complained to Army officials on numerous occasions that Halliburton had been unlawfully receiving special treatment for work in Iraq and Kuwait and the Balkans. Criminal investigations were opened by the United States Justice Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Pentagon's Inspector General. These investigations found no wrongdoing within the contract award and execution process. One of Greenhouse's claims, she said that military auditors caught Halliburton overcharging the Pentagon for fuel deliveries into Iraq. She also complained that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld's office took control of every aspect of Halliburton's $7 billion Iraqi oil infrastructure contract. Greenhouse was later demoted for poor performance in her position. Her attorney, Michael Cohen, portrayed her performance reviews as punishment for criticizing the administration. He stated in the New York Times that she is being demoted because of her strict adherence to procurement requirements and the Army's preference to sidestep them when it suits their needs. Who is a patriot in this scenario? The whistleblower or the politicians who make their riches by exploiting resources whenever and wherever they can and escape consequences because of their power and position? What were the soldiers in Iraq fighting and dying for? Are you a patriotic American when you ask such questions, or when you don't ask such questions to go along and get along? The sight of flag-draped coffins decorating a meme that says, "Remember the real meaning of Memorial Day," stirs something in me, makes my stomach feel tied in knots. I commiserate with those men and women whose lives were given up for a cause they believed in, and I grieve with their families, their friends, their loved ones. They are never coming back. Was their sacrifice worth it? Were they heroes or victims or something in between? Only they know, and they're not talking. These are the closing lines to the musical offering provided by Ed Priest today. Young Willie McBride, I can't help wonder why. Do those that lie here know why they died? And did they believe when they answered the call? Did they really believe this war would end wars? Well, the sorrow, the suffering, the glory, the pain, the killing and dying were all done in vain. For young Willie McBride, it happened again and again and again and again and again. It is right and fitting that we honor today those who died fighting for a cause they believed in, willing to risk their lives for something larger than themselves. And it is right and fitting that we question the legitimacy of any cause we are asked to lay down our lives for. What are you willing to risk your life for? That may be the most important question we can ask ourselves on this Memorial Day weekend. This time of remembrance, this unofficial start of the summer season. I ask you to keep that question alive in your hearts, here, today, and tomorrow, whether at a barbecue or at the beach. It's the most meaningful way we can honor the holiday, don't you think?